So I want to welcome everybody to this Funly Connected training for the Volunteer Center of South Maryland. I wanted to start by introducing myself. My name is Eric. I work for Funly Connect. I've been working here for about 4 years now, doing everything from customer support to tutorials to training to everything in between. So I've been working with this product for a long time and with nonprofits for a while. So a little my background. So let's just start off with the screen you're showing you right now. This is the Volunteer Center of Southern Maryland's volunteer portal. You'll get very familiar with this over the coming time span. This is where your opportunities can be posted, and they should have provided you with the link, or you can go through their public site into their portal. Two things I want to point out here. This is where, if you haven't already, you'll go ahead and sign up for your account, or you can go ahead and log in from here. So we have under organizations, become a partner to register your account, or organization login. And so once you're logged in, you will be taken to your dashboard. So let's start with a little navigation of the system and how to get around. So we're going to start with pointing out the three main menus of interest to you. We have the quick menu, we have the account menu, and we have the main menu. So my account's the same type you guys have, but it'll be attached. It's a demo system, so nothing in here is real. So let's start with the quick menu. First thing on the quick menu we have is the quick search. So this is an easy way to find volunteers in your system. So for example, I can look up Eric and just hit enter, and this will bring up all the Erics in my system. So I think there should only be one, me. So in this case, since there is only one Eric in my entire system, it actually opens up Eric's record right away. So this is actually the preview screen, the summary screen for a volunteer. Had we had more contacts that fit my description, we would have actually got a result list, which we'll run a search in a moment to get such an example. So that's the quick search, easy way to find volunteers. We also have the advanced search. Excuse me. So with the advanced search, we can look for volunteers that have perhaps other criteria that we're trying to find them by. So instead of just first name or last name or email, we can look at their state or address information, or just about any other piece of information in the system, including the skills that they may have. So let's go ahead and say I want to find all the males in my system. So I'm going to use other criteria, gender, who is in the group of people who have the male tag on them, and I can go ahead and search. So this should come up with a small number of volunteers, it's a small database, and it will present me a list of those volunteers. So we have it. I've got 3 people who actually have that tag on their record. And from here, I can click on their names and get to that summary screen we just saw. Or I can even edit them, which we'll do in a little bit. And if need be, I can also assign them to an opportunity from here. So we can do a couple of things from here. There's a couple different places we can do various actions. That's one example. We can also take mass actions against them, specifically communications. And we'll talk a little bit about communications later on. So we'll talk more about volunteers in a little bit. But let's go ahead and talk about the next menu item, which is the quick add menu item, which will actually bring us into working with volunteers. So this quick add menu item is great for taking certain actions that are pretty common in the system. Adding volunteers, adding basic opportunities and advanced opportunities, we'll talk about these later, and adding hours. So let's actually go ahead and add a volunteer. So add volunteer, and it will bring up the add edit volunteer screen. So this is a screen you'd also get if you were to edit a volunteer. So here all we need to put in is first name and last name, and everything else is optional. However, the more you can put in, obviously the better. So a couple items I do want to point out on this screen that are particularly useful is, in addition to first name and last name, if you provide an email for your volunteer. you can actually mark this box, and when you save, it will send an email to the volunteer saying that you have created an account for them and that they may set it up and take control of it. Because ideally, that's what you would like. You'd like your volunteers to have their own accounts and the ability to manage their information, possibly even do their own scheduling. Otherwise, everything here is just more for your reference and or your ability to pull reports on them. So skills, causes they're interested in, how we communicate with them, notice preferences, special comments just for your bookkeeping, and then all the basic fields. If they created their account online, much of this will be filled in already for you, and as they fill in application forms, more information will be added to their contact record. So that's adding a contact. We'll see another way you can add contacts in short, kind of a truncated version, later on. So next, so that's all we're going to cover right now in the quick add menu. We're actually going to use the long way for that later on. We also have recently visited volunteers, so Eric Metzler, Bob Smythe, and recently visited pages. So this is a great way to go back to maybe a search you had just completed. So I could actually go back to that search without having to redo it by just clicking on the recently visited pages for that search. Oh, that brought me to the search. I wanted well, anyway, clicked the wrong thing. So that is the quick menu. From here, we also have the account menu. The only two items I want to talk about on this menu are My Account and Support. So My Account is how you can get into your account page and update your credentials, add a user if you need to, and update your organization's information. So organization information, My Account, which is how you can manage any add-ons or what have you, credentials, where you can update your username and password, and users and application roles. So we're not going to talk too much about that, and let's go ahead and go back. The other option in the account menu, back one more, I want to mention is support. This will have a variety of tutorials and recorded webinars and other materials that we at Funnily Connect provide all of our organizations. So it may contain tutorials on features you don't have, so just putting that out there. And on that note, there are going to be some features on your account we will not be covering today, so I just want to put that out there. I'll try to make sure at least to mention them as we pass them, just for time purposes. And then, last but not least, the main menu. So everything we could do with the quick menu, we can do from here. And there's a couple of items in here that we're going to cover today. So the first one we're going to talk about is configurations. Now we're not going to spend much time on configurations today. There's only a few that we need to talk about. So let's start with configurations and then we'll move on. So configurations. So configurations is, well, what happens to have a variety of configurations for your system. Most of these are actually the configuration of search tags that we'll be using later. So our search tags are activity types, population served, age groups required, skills, age groups served, and causes. So I'm not going to go into these right now. I just want to make sure you know where they are. And just to let you know, and later on we'll actually see them in use. And I'll give you a definition of what each of them is. Another one I want to mention in brief is custom datasets. So custom datasets is a way to extend the system to track information that does not come with the system. So we track name, email, all that, but you may need to track information that's either opportunity specific or specific to your organization, like background checks, fingerprinting if you're doing tutoring with kids and required in your state, as well as maybe custom questions about more information about skills and experience on it for an application form. So a data set is basically a container, a grouping of questions, and those questions are fields. So here I have two demographic information, and if I edit it, we'll see that I'm asking questions regarding a volunteer's ethnicity, household income level, and marital status. These might not make sense to you, they may, I'm not certain, but just as an example. So I'm not going to go much more into that, just know that this is an available feature, It's pretty easy to set up, just add the new fields that you want, and we'll see these in a few minutes when we do application forms. So that's configurations. I'm going to use my left-hand menu here just to get back to the configuration screen. I could also use it to navigate a bit more. The other one I might recommend checking out is email notifications. As a basic free account, there's not going to be too many here that are applicable to you, but you will get certain emails for certain things that may happen, and you can configure what those look like. So that's all I want to cover in configurations for now. Most of it's just your search tags, excuse me, and we'll see, like I said, we'll see those in play a little bit later on. So from here, once we have these configurations items out of the way, specifically custom data sets, we now have the ability to start working on our actual day-to-day operational flow. So this is where we're going to talk about application forms and the creation and management of opportunities. The feature that we're going to skip at this time is orientations and trainings. Be aware that it is present. You have the ability to say that you have certain orientations and trainings that a volunteer may have to attend. And in the opportunities, you'll say which ones they have to attend. And with these, you'll get to say when it happens and some details and limits and stuff like that. So we're going to skip that for now, but be aware it is present. And we're going to talk about designing application forms. So you don't have to have an application form attached to an opportunity, but if you want to, you can. And if you create this application form, we can attach it to an opportunity and require that in addition to whatever a volunteer may have filled out with their registering of their account, that they also have to fill out certain other information. So we can make some of that required or leave it optional. So here to create a new form, add new form, and I have two forms already created, a tutor form and a general form. And I can go ahead and edit one of these forms or even delete it or copy it. If it's not in use, I can delete it. So I'm going to edit it. And I can indicate which fields are available. So here I have name, address, tutoring information, which was a custom data set, and an emergency contact field. I can add a new field with add new field to select the one I want. If it's a custom data set, click on custom data set and select which data set you want, and it'll add it in. I can move things around if I want to. So I'm going to drop it in there. I can remove a section. I can edit a section and even mark it required. Custom data sets are made required or staff use only on the configuration side. And put user guidelines to help, tell them what should be in these fields, and then be done. And then when I'm done setting up my form, go ahead and hit save. So it's a pretty straightforward form editor. Just drag and drop what you need, select what you need, move things around. And then from there, when it shows online, it'll basically show like this, and the volunteer can fill in the information. Since the volunteer will be logged in, if they've already answered a question, their previous answer will be present, and they can simply review or change their previous answer, updating the system and the information available to you. Alrighty, so let's save our little changes we made and move on. So now that you have your application forms that you may want to use, it's time to actually start making opportunities. So we're going to do this, like I mentioned, we could do it from the quick add menu, but we're going to do it from our opportunities, from the main menu. And this our opportunities page is what's going to be the page that shows you all your currently created opportunities and the ability to manage them from there. So we'll talk about what these columns do a little bit later when we talk about managing volunteers, but let's start by actually creating an opportunity and covering the creation of opportunities. So we have two kinds of opportunities in the system. They're not too dissimilar. We have basic and we have advanced. And the main difference between the two is the level of configuration that you do regarding scheduling. So a basic opportunity is usually pretty straightforward. It basically is saying I have an opportunity on a day or maybe a small date range, and the volunteers will show up from this time to this time. One location, nothing too fancy. An advanced opportunity has full scheduling where you can specify different days, different times for those days, different positions for the different times and different shifts, and so on. We will cover both. But let's start with a basic opportunity. So to create a basic opportunity, add basic opportunity. I'm going to go ahead and just edit one that I've previously configured. So grounds cleanup for the winter time. So here's our first screen that we have, and it's already filled out for us. So let's cover all the different options. First things first, what is the name of this opportunity? So a lot of times I describe opportunities in the same way someone might describe a job posting for a company. It's very similar in concept. So the opportunity name would probably be the same as the name of the job posting. It should be something that tells people what this opportunity is and what kind of volunteers we might need. So grounds cleanup in the winter. I might say that differently, but that's what I wrote at the time, is telling us that volunteer in this opportunity is going to be cleaning up the grounds during the winter. So it's pretty straightforward. It could be the name of the event. So Human Race 2016 Race Day Volunteer. Tells you a lot about what this opportunity is going to be doing. But we don't have to get too descriptive, because for that we have the opportunity details section. And this is actually going to be what goes on the website, and will tell the volunteer the full details. So the name's just to catch their attention. The opportunity details is the job posting itself, if you want to go with that example. And we'll tell the volunteer what they're doing, why it matters, and some of the requirements in a written out form for this opportunity. Next we have the owner, currently set to me, which is basically what user is in charge of this opportunity and will get any email notifications from the volunteer, should the volunteer say, I want to contact the opportunity owner. If you have multiple users in your system, you have multiple to select from. I only have the one. Most of y'all will probably only have one as well. So this can usually be just left as me. Next, we have locations. For a basic opportunity, we have only one location. And this is where the opportunity will actually happen, where the volunteer will be doing their opportunity hours, volunteering hours. So for a basic opportunity, it's going to just be the one location. It's going to default to whatever your organization's main location is. I call mine main office. It's going to say default. You can edit this and change it to something else, change the title and the location on the map. And as we can see, it's currently pointing to actually where my offices are. And I'll show you in advanced how we can add multiple. Next, we have positions. This is more used for advanced opportunities, but you may want it to indicate it also for a basic. This is saying what are the different jobs, the different positions within the opportunity. So using human race, most places people are familiar with it. It's a pretty big event in most areas. They have multiple things that people need to do. So our opportunity might have been race day volunteer, but what is that volunteer doing at the event? Now, if it's something we don't figure out till we get there, we might not actually be doing any positions, but we may decide that we want to schedule this ahead of time. So we might have some people working registration and various other clerical work, recording race results, things like that. And other people just, handing out drinks and food along the way, and other people actually manning booths and what have you. So there'd be examples of 3 different positions, registration and bookkeeping, uh, uh, runner support, and merchandise. Let's go with that. So create your positions, add new position, put the name. You can specify an hourly value, don't have to. So you can save and add new to add multiple, or go ahead and close. And from here, we start getting into scheduling. So for an advanced opportunity, we would not have scheduling right here. And I do apologize for the noise in the background. The gardener showed up. So scheduling on a basic opportunity we do on this screen. On advanced, we'd actually do it as step 3, and we'll see that. For a basic opportunity, we have 2 kinds of scheduling. We have one time, which would be like a human race kind of thing. It's one day, or ongoing, which is our example here. So one time says I just need them to show up for one day. Ongoing says I need them to show up from this date to this date for the time specified below. So we're not specifying what days of the week, just that from this time to this time. So here I have it set for quite a long time period, about 2 years. Normally I would not recommend a time period this long, so let's shrink it down and just have it for this 2-month period. So actually I think we're still technically in winter, so let's extend this into the end of March. So there's that. I usually recommend keep your time periods into manageable chunks. I have seen some organizations put the times like really far out into the future to effectively indicate an indefinite time period, but chances are your volunteers will not be with you for 12 years. They will probably be with you for only a handful of months to maybe a year. So I recommend making opportunities in 1 month, quarter, or year time increments so that you can have fresh lists every year, quarter, or month. Okay. So after you set your schedule, when the opportunity, the day's time frame is available, then we make the shift, the actual time period during the day, start time, end time, that the volunteer will be working. So for basic, it's pretty straightforward. Shift name, you can just leave that be, and then start time and end time. So here I would say something like volunteer starting maybe at 9 a.m. and going till noon. It's just a 3-hour opportunity. Alternatively, I can also say, you know what, we don't know when the volunteer is going to show up. They just show up on their own time, clean up the grounds, and then leave. In which case it would be time is flexible, which is actually what I have turned on. So this basically says my volunteer from this date to this date will show up when they please, at any time they please, and clean up our grounds. But that's up to you. So that's a basic opportunity. At this point, I'm actually going to close out of this basic opportunity and go into an advanced, because from this point forward, they are effectively the same except for the scheduling. So let's exit this basic opportunity and let's pretend we were creating an advanced opportunity. So an advanced opportunity, like I mentioned, has more complex scheduling and can be useful if you've got, even for a one-time event, where you've got different people coming at different times doing different things. So add advanced opportunity is how you create one. And let's go and pull up the gallery docents example that I've got here. So let's pretend this is an arts organization with an art gallery, or maybe multiple, and see how this looks. So the first thing we notice is we don't have any scheduling information here, because we're going to do that later, because we now have a scheduling and shift tab. We also now have the ability to add multiple locations. So if this opportunity were happening at multiple locations, we can go ahead and indicate that. So human race usually is only one location, but let's pretend you're maybe a Habitat for Humanity and you have house construction at multiple houses. That's where you may have multiple locations. Or this is an internship opportunity, because it's a kind of volunteer. And the intern, you have multiple offices throughout your city or in 2 different cities that are real close to each other. So you may have multiple locations. So add new location, add location, give it a title, start typing in the address, and as you type, it'll start making suggestions until you find the one you like. Here we go, and then save. So I'm not going to save this. The rest of this is the same as we saw before. Save and next. Brings us to what we call the requirements tab. So this is a mix of search tags and various settings. So some of these we're going to ignore because they're for features that we don't have, that you won't have. Otherwise, let's go through them all. So this top section is our search tags. We talked about these earlier. Causes, skills, activity types, and so on. So let's give some definitions for these real quick. Cause. The cause is the overarching, the overarching, I guess you can call it almost a theme that this opportunity supports. It's probably driven by your mission statement. What are you as an organization? What do you do? What do you support? What is the overarching need that you're supporting? So that's what your cause is. So for an arts organization, it's arts and culture. For maybe an animal shelter, they're animals. For a organization that works with school children, children and youth education, so on and so forth. Family services, senior services, hunger and homelessness, what have you. So indicate, and this is the only required field, the cause that this opportunity is supporting. And then we indicate the activity type, which is what is the person actually doing in support of this cause. And so you can create these, and if we were doing a human race, perhaps maybe it's an event organization, or if you're part of an organization that provides meals to people with illnesses so that they have a little easier time of it, meal preparation and food preparation and meal services. So what are they actually doing in support of this greater cause? So I don't actually have one that fits because I've never bothered making one, but tours, something like that, guiding tours maybe for a docent program. And then the skills. What skills would a volunteer need to do the activity to support this cause? It's kind of a progression there. So an intern might be a clerical, administration support and clerical, supporting arts and culture, perhaps, and they need skills like accounting and admin and clerical and what have you. And so these are all searchable. So a volunteer can say, I want to help support arts and culture, and so then I can search for arts and culture and find this opportunity. So that's how all these search tags will work. Over here on the right, who's actually being benefited by this opportunity? For something like arts and culture, it's probably all ages with no particular population or gender. If this were a women's shelter, gender would be used. If this were human race, it'd probably be all ages, once again, and so on and so forth. Depends on the organization. So age group being benefited, population, and the specific gender if applicable. Next, we're looking at the volunteer themselves, specifically their age. So I consider this the most important of all search tags, which might seem a little interesting, but my reason for this is if a volunteer does get a hold of me, because it happens, my most often question is, I'm looking for an opportunity appropriate to my age because I'm a teenager, or I'm looking for an opportunity appropriate for my son, daughter, what have you, who is a teenager. So a lot of times people are looking for opportunities for teens or kids. And a lot of times though I direct them to this field to search for, it is either inappropriately or just not set. So I recommend, if no other search tag, aside from the one that you have to, causes, I recommend setting this one for all your opportunities so that you can get the appropriate age to volunteers and assist your volunteers finding stuff appropriate for them. So age of the volunteer, and we provide some age groups and you can make your own. And then lastly, do you allow team or group signups? We're not going to talk too much about that feature, but it is possible for volunteers to band together as a team. You'll see it with companies a lot. And then they can apply, if you allow them, right now I don't, to apply to an opportunity as a group. Grounds cleanup might be appropriate. Docent, you don't really need 20 people coming from a company. So that's our search tags. From here, we have a variety of settings. The first one, we'll stick on the right here, and that's the only thing we're going to cover down here, is what form, if any, will this opportunity use. So I can also, once I select it, I can edit the form, or I can add a new form from this screen. So I don't have to have created it previously. Nice shortcut. The rest of these are for a feature that is an add-on or that I recommend leaving on, and we'll cover this feature briefly, but it's in a little bit. Apologies. And over here, we have a couple of additional options. And these control how much power the volunteer may have to take on almost admin level clerical tasks for this opportunity. So the first one is, do we allow the volunteer to schedule themselves? So when a volunteer signs up and goes through the other steps, when they get to the point where it's determined when they will show up, is that something reserved purely for you as an admin, or do you allow them to do it? I currently am allowing them. On a similar vein, can they log their own hours? In which case you simply have to vet them. So for my grounds upkeep folk who are coming and going, that might be an example where you'd allow them to log their own hours. They say I showed up from 2 to 5 and worked on the grounds, and you can verify that that happened or not. Otherwise, they'd have to do a sign in, sign out, and then you'd have to enter it in. So you can also give them the power to log hours. There's another step that we can add to the process. It's whether or not a volunteer has to be approved. So for an opportunity where you actually want to make sure they have the appropriate skills, this is something that you would want to turn on. Approval required for volunteer application. What this means is that they will go online, fill out any form, or just simply apply for it, and they'll be added to a pending list for that opportunity, and you will be allowed to vet their application and either approve it or deny it. And so you get the final say on if they are a volunteer. Until that happens, they aren't. So for something like grounds cleanup, you just need people, you might not use that. For something like a tutoring program, you definitely want to vet those folk, and so you would want this turned on. And then lastly, going back to that feature that we kind of skipped, was orientations and trainings. Do we have one? Which one is it? I don't currently have any configured. So this is our search tags and variety of settings regarding the behavior of this opportunity. So this is going to be the same for both basic and free. And if we want to kind of ad hoc add some search tags, we can go ahead and do that here. All right, so let's go ahead and save and next. And let's talk about scheduling. So scheduling is where we actually saw this a little bit earlier, where we actually say what is the volunteer's options for when, what days, and times they show up. So an example I always use, kind of an analogy, is if anyone ever worked retail or even just any job, you had a schedule when that job was open, when the business hours overall for that office, for that store, and then the schedule. What were your hours? So schedule is where we specify either the time frame or the actual days of the week that the office, the location, is going to have volunteers showing up. And our shifts, you can actually see some over here configured, is our when will volunteers actually show up on those days and times that they will be there. So for example, our store might be open Monday through Friday, and we have some people who show up from 9 to 1, 1 to 5, and some people who do 9 to 5. So we could have 3 different shifts on different days. So let's go through our various options. Well, the first thing we do is we say, what location are we scheduling for? If you're only scheduling for, if you only have one location on your opportunity, not a big hassle to select. I have seen opportunities all the way up to about 20 different locations. So it can get quite complex if you want to. So select your location, and then we say, what is our schedule? So we saw one time already. This basically means it's one day. So human race kind of things, festivals, so on and so forth. Then we have weekly. This is the most commonly used one. This allows us to say from this date to this date, we need volunteers on certain days of the week, or alternating, or certain days of the week for certain parts of the month. So it's always the second Tuesday, so on and so forth. Most of the time it's every. We also have a monthly option. I don't see this used very often, but this says the specific day of the month. So if you have an intern program and certain things have to happen on certain dates as opposed to certain days of the week, you might use this. Ongoing, we saw as well. This is where, similar to weekly, but we don't actually care about the individual days of the week. So we just know the volunteer will show up from this date to this date at some point. And then we have other. Very rarely used, but very important to have. This is for erratic schedules. So we don't have a single specific date, so we can't use one time, but it's not certain days of the week or certain days of the month. But it is a bit more specific than ongoing. This is where, say, we need a volunteer this Tuesday, next Wednesday, the Thursday after that, we skip a week from there, and then day Tuesday and Friday after that. So that's pretty erratic. So that's where other comes into play. You specify the exact dates. This is handy if perhaps you're an outdoors organization, which does opportunities based on the tide, or perhaps based on lunar cycles. So maybe you do an astronomical event, you need volunteers to just kind of make sure people are safe and things are taken care of. And so it's based on when is the new moon, because you don't do astronomy when there's a full moon. So that's an example of other. So let's go ahead and look at weekly. So here I can set up my schedule to be, say, the month of, let's start with, the month of March. So it's just 1 month. And it's going to be every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, for example. So I would go ahead and save this. And so this means that my default location is available these days of the week. But I haven't specified exactly what times. So that's actually what I have over here, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and actually Saturday, so that we can get a bit more interesting. So we would go ahead and save this, and our shift would get added over here. If this was the first one, so I'm going to go ahead and save it, it's actually going to prompt us also for the first schedule on that first shift on that schedule. So I added a Monday through Friday shift for the month of March, and now I get to go ahead and configure my scheduling. So as before, this is the actual times. So we start with a shift name. The shift name is usually something descriptive that lets you or the volunteer, if they're scheduling themselves, know what will I actually be signing up for this time period. So something like Monday morning, if it's just for Mondays in the morning, or weekday afternoon, and so on. So I could do Monday morning shift. You can see I've done it before, and specify it's just for Mondays. Or I could say it's like weekday morning and Monday through Friday without Saturday, whatever makes sense. Shifts can have gaps, they can have overlap, whatever you need. So Mondays, and then we specify the time like we did previously, say 9 a.m. to, well, I know it's in the afternoon, but let's say 1 p.m. And then here we have a slight variation from what we did with shifts earlier. We actually get to say which positions, if we had multiple, do we need for this shift. So for a human race example, I mentioned I might have those 3 different jobs volunteers might be doing, and so I can say, well, I need these ones, and how many, what's the maximum that I can use for them. So Monday morning I need no more than 12. Well, okay, that's probably going to be more like 4. And then if I had another volunteer position, I could say how many of those I needed, if at all. So you don't have to use all your positions. So, and then save. So here we have it, the schedules that we've created, which, as I mentioned, are the actual days or time frame, the opportunities available, and then the shifts, which are the actual time. I can edit schedules, which will open it up over here. I can edit shifts. I can delete shifts. This is the one I just created, yeah. So it's confirm, yeah, I'm okay with deleting it. And I can also delete schedules. So let's go ahead and do that because I don't need them. So now I'm back to where I was before. And that's schedules and shifts. One thing I forgot to mention about schedules is sometimes when you're going with repeating schedules, which aren't other, you will need exceptions for holidays. So this is allowing you to put date ranges in which this will not apply. So Thanksgiving, Christmas, things like that. So I forgot to mention that earlier. All right, so we're just about done creating this opportunity. And then we got 15 minutes to cover the remainder. We're doing okay there. So after that, we're going to go next. And our final step is publishing it to the Volunteer Action Center. So in my example here, I accidentally misconfigured my Volunteer Action Center and put it under my name instead of a name for an organization, so ignore that. But Eric Metzler, let's pretend this says Volunteer Center of Southern Maryland. And so what you'll do is you'll check the Action Center. If there is a particular program that they have made available for opportunities, they may not, then you can also try to publish to that to that program. And then you'll go ahead and click the Publish Unpublished Action Center button down in the right-hand corner. And so this will send a request to the Volunteer Action Center to approve your opportunity. And if approved, will be published to their public portal, which we saw here. If it is not approved, then it will not say so. So once it's approved, you'll see posting accepted and published. Until you see this here, it means it is not on their public site. So if you're ever noticing that an opportunity has not shown up on the public site, go ahead and check here, and it is possible it just hasn't been reviewed yet. And that is the creation of opportunities. So now we still have, okay, so here we have it, our opportunities that we've created. I had them previously, but if we had created more, they'd be here. So now, let's talk about managing volunteers. As volunteers sign up online, depending on how you set up your opportunity, they will be either automatically added to the list of volunteers, or they will be added to volunteers awaiting approval. Unfortunately, I don't have any currently to show. If they're awaiting approval, you will click on the number, you will see a list of the volunteers, and under action, so unfortunately I don't have an example here, it will say approve or reject. If I reject, it's an instant reject. If I hit approve, it will pull up their information, if there's an application form, and allow you to review it and then do a final approve or reject. Once approved, it will be as if they had always been approved. They'll be taken out of the awaiting approval and added to the volunteer list. If for some reason you need to add a volunteer manually, well, we did kind of already see that earlier when we were on the search list. We saw that we can assign a volunteer. I can also do it from this screen. I can also do it from their record. A lot of places you can do it. So I can go add or assign volunteer. And this will bring up the screen to add volunteers. If a volunteer is already in my system, as I start typing, I have no mics, let's do Eric. It will actually bring up the record. I can select it and assign volunteer. I, however, am already assigned, so it won't let me assign it twice. If they're not already in the system, so Mike, last name, Portnoy, that's his last name, he doesn't exist in my system. So actually when I click out, the system will prompt me to add him. So this is that truncated option I showed. So we can create volunteers as we go and keep our flow moving and then come back to them later and fill in their details, editing them as we saw earlier. So I'm just going to add Mike in real quick, hit save. Now Mike is in my database and I can assign him, assign volunteer. So he is now assigned. If I close this out, my volunteer list is now at 4. All right, so that's adding volunteers. And next, let's work with those volunteers. So to view the volunteers for an opportunity, we can either click on the number or manage volunteers. And everything else we're going to be doing regarding volunteer management will be done from this screen. Some of the things we do here, we can actually do elsewhere, or the volunteer could do for themselves. So here we have our volunteers. We have 4 of them. Some of them we see need to be scheduled. Some of them have log hours. If we're using volunteer orientations and that was required, we'd also have that as an option. So this next step column is basically going to tell us what we need to do next. When a volunteer goes to their dashboard, in their My Opportunities section, they will have a similar next step section. And based on whatever they're allowed to do, can themselves take those next steps. So they will have scheduling or log hours if they are allowed to do so. And as we saw in requirements, that's how you specify whether or not they're allowed to do so. So let's go ahead and schedule someone and then log hours. And then we're going to show another way to log hours called attendance. I mentioned it kind of briefly earlier, kind of skipped the setting. So let's go ahead and schedule Mike Portnoy here. So we're going to click on scheduling. And this is similar to what a volunteer would see. So their first thing they get to do is select what location. So default location, or you may have called it something different. The shift, and so this is why shift names being clear is very important. So I can go weekday morning. I know exactly what that means, weekday morning. Or weekend shift, not as clear. So, but clarity can help, especially when the volunteer is doing their scheduling. So I'm going to do a weekday morning shift, and I'm going to select what position. So these positions are drawn from the shift, and the shift are drawn from the location. And then actually the details of what I'm doing. So it's going to default to whatever that shift was set up as, but I can change it. So day of week, weekday morning, maybe I've decided I can only do Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. So they can decide, or you can decide that they don't have to do Wednesdays. Or you can say, check all, or check just one. Whatever makes sense for your situation. If you're going to have a lot of people with just one days, I might have actually said do Mondays versus Tuesdays so that you can a bit more clearly say who's showing up on what days. So let's just do check all. I can also go by date if I wanted to and specify by individual dates. But let's go by day of week, check all. And then the from date and till date is the date range they've agreed to. This person's agreed to a year. If they've agreed to anything less, you can specify less than that. From time, end time, same thing. So let's just leave these with the default and save. So now my person is scheduled. You may be wondering, what is that save and add new button all about? So what this lets me do is if a volunteer is actually signed up for separate shifts, I can actually schedule them as such. So I could go save and add new and then sign them up for, say, the weekend shift. So it is possible for a volunteer to be signed up for multiple shifts, if applicable. So in this case, I just did the one. All right, so Mike Portnoy here is now been scheduled, and his remaining task is now to be a volunteer, to show up, and have his hours logged. So let's talk about logging hours. One, I mentioned a volunteer could log their own hours, in which case they may have unverified hours that you need to review. So that's actually done from the previous screen. Or we will go ahead and log the hours for them. So log hours and pick their assignment, which is what date, what location, shift, and position. And for a given time, date or date range, what hours did they actually do and what did they do? So this is a very granular, very day-by-day approach, but sometimes it can be really helpful if you're kind of doing, going back a couple days. So here I could say on the 1st, Mike did 4 hours of tours. Save, and there it is. Close, and now he'll have 4 hours logged against his record. I'm going to report on that and pull it up. Another way to log hours is using attendance. This is a nice feature because you can do this on a day-by-day basis. I can say, right, on the 8th, people showed up or they didn't show up. And eventually we're going to have reports that allow you to actually see, how many times does a person not show up. So you can actually get a sense for, are they a constant no-show and maybe we should just drop them. So here I can go, all right, Mike Portnoy, I'm going to check him in. We don't know about Charles yet. Maybe it's too early in the day. So he's attended. And now if I go to manage volunteers, we'll see that Mike is up to 6 hours. It was a 3-hour shift. It was a 2-hour shift. Oh, whatever the shift was. I forgot what the time frame was. So when I put it in by hand, I can set whatever number I want. I just put 4 in, although I think it was only supposed to be 2. And then check-in actually calculates it for you. So check-in, the attendance screen is a very nice option for just going attended, 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 and the system will log the hours for you. So that's the option I actually recommend. And that's managing volunteers. There's really not much more from beyond that. The next thing will be communicating with them. So we have just gone over how to add a volunteer manually, how to approve them if they signed up online and need vetting, how to schedule them, and how to log hours for them. So how do we talk to them? Well, we have 2 options. One, let's go back to our opportunity list. I could have used the back button, but I always use the main menu. How to have it. So if I want to just talk to every volunteer for a specific opportunity, I could, for example, go to Gallery Docents and go to Communicate. And what this will do is we'll open up effectively a bulk email process that will allow me to indicate the name for my reference purposes, the sender name, the sender email, the subject line of that email, who is it going to, for you it's always going to be volunteer, and create a template for the content. So if anyone's ever used MailChimp, very similar in concept and implementation, and you can basically use or make a template to send to the volunteers, and in the next step you'd actually select them. So let's do this. Reminder, sender email, sender name, excuse me, is Eric, sender email, eric@example.com, remember your paperwork, and I can, like I said, either select a previous template or create a new template. Here I'm going to go ahead and edit my template, and we'll go over the template editor very briefly. It's pretty straightforward. It's kind of what you see is what you get, drag and drop kind of thing. And here's the one I used, just kind of almost an e-card in a way. We have the various sections which we can edit, and then you can edit the content over here. We can add new widgets like buttons and dividers, images, text, 2-column text, and we can delete as well as copy, and then rename as appropriate up here at the top. So you just put in your content however you want it. With this content, helps if I actually see where do I want it. There we go. Let's put it at the top there. Why not? We have an editor. It's pretty straightforward, kind of a standard word processor layout, bold, italic, all that fun stuff, as well as some placeholders. Client, by the way, is you, and then organization and address information for the volunteer. So that way you can actually address them by name if you want to. And then save. So we save our template. By the way, all of our templates are also in my templates, so you can come at them from there as well. And so once you fill out what you want, maybe some attachments, save and proceed. By default, all your people for this opportunity will already be selected, so I can just go search if I don't want to narrow it down anymore. And I will have 2 people who I have emails for that I can email. I can also use search criteria, kind of like we saw earlier, to whittle this down to only certain people in the opportunity. And then last but not least, save and proceed. And we can send ourselves a test email. I always recommend that. And then when we hit send, the system will ask us, do we want to send it now or send it at a different date? So pretty useful tool for sending out communications. We can also come at it from communication history or create new and do one for the entire system. So communication history has the stuff that I've sent out previously or I've been working on. And we do have summary statistics for these, open and close, open and reject rates and stuff like that. And if I do create communication in my select recipients, I'll actually be searching against all volunteers in my entire system, not just a single opportunity. So this is how you can say, maybe send out a weekly or monthly newsletter for all volunteers. So that's the communication piece. Last actual piece of the system to cover is just to let you know about reporting. So I'm not going to cover making your own reports, much bigger topic than we have time for today. Default reports have a variety of pre-built reports in the system. We are always open to making requests for making more reports, so if you have an idea, let the Volunteer Center know. And we can create more and basically just get a kind of a report you want. You can click on the name to execute it. You click on the I to see what it's all about. So this will give you a description about it. Nothing too fancy here. And you can also execute from here and pick what, or change it to a different format. The default is PDF at the moment for this one. You can also schedule reports to run automatically for you and be emailed to you. So just figured I'd mention that. So that's default reports. And that is all I have for today. So we made it in an hour. I'll go ahead and open up the floor for questions in just a moment. But to just recap what we covered, we went through basic navigation of the system, the quick menu, the account menu, and the main menu. We talked about configurations. We talked about the creation of application forms, the creation of opportunities, both basic and advanced, specifically the scheduling involved in advanced. We talked about assigning and managing volunteers, scheduling volunteers, and logging hours. And then we talked about communicating with volunteers and default reports.